so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on this show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Powwow episode, I am extremely excited to have Richard Rudd here with me on the show. Richard is a teacher, mystic, poet, author who is best known for his widely acclaimed book, The Gene Keys, which suggests there is an inner language written deep inside each human's DNA that can be decoded to help us transform our core beliefs about ourselves and ultimately raise us to a higher level of awareness. Super excited to have you here, Richard. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks very much, Brendan. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this ever since a mutual friend, Michael Rostowski, connected us, and he was like, you got to get Richard on. And I'm like, can you help me get Richard on? And he's like, yes. And here we are. So definitely appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit of insight into the Gene Keys and just, the wisdom that you have in general. I was at a festival this weekend and someone was playing a mix, an audio mix of some music with you speaking, over top of it. And I'm not sure where it came from. I meant to get it from them before I left and ask them to send it to me because there's so much wisdom in the things that you're saying. And I absolutely loved it. So it got me very extra excited to have this powwow with you. And I'm going to jump right in I'm pretty predictable in my opening question and my closing question. And my opening question is, you're in an elevator, you have 10 floors to answer. The person next to you looks over, says, what's your passion? What do you say?
Well, that's always a good one.
Especially with only 10 floors.
My passion, well, in a word, I'm a contemplative. I love to contemplate. And the art of contemplation is something of a lost art, and it's more than just thinking. It's a way of being. It's an approach towards life. It's an approach towards the mystery of life, and it's both playful but also very serious at the same time. So my real passion is exploring the life through the lens of that contemplative insight. And what I have found for me is that when I approach life through this method or art, if you like, it's a poetic way of living life as well, then life comes alive and is very rich. And also I've found that it leads to kind of leaps in consciousness. So I've now found myself sharing that approach and teaching it, and that's really it. It's, for me, it's all about that. It's
modern day Socrates.
Yeah.
Contemplating the greater mysteries. It definitely is one of my favorite things to do as well. And so, let's jump right in, and maybe a little background would be helpful. If you could tell us a little bit about your story and this unique, very unique journey that you're on.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm quite I'm a very much regular guy. I live with my family and 3 children, and my story is that I was always interested in sort of the mysteries of life, and from a young age. And in my late 20s, I had an unexpected big spiritual experience. Some people will kind of relate to that. And I woke up one morning, and I was in this experience. I was in this field of light, and it lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. And in those 3 days and 3 nights, I pretty much saw everything.
3 days and 3 nights?
Yeah. No
That's
sleep.
a long time.
No sleep. No. And no drugs or anything like that. No substances involved. Nothing like that. Just completely an opening to other realms, to an omniscience, if you like. And
wow.
And it was through that sort of big download, that awakening, or that memory, that my life changed its tack. And it wasn't an easy experience, and I wouldn't even necessarily wish it on anyone else.
Wow.
The experience itself was very blissful, but when I came down off that experience, it was very difficult for me, because I didn't know what to do with myself. And I didn't know how to integrate that, and it took me a long time. And so I went through various phases. One phase when I believed I was kind of the Messiah, and then a phase where I thought I was mad, and then a phase where I just went into pure denial. And I said that didn't happen. It's ridiculous. And slowly over the kind of years, the things that I saw and that big kind of experience started to kind of. I managed to integrate it, and over time, it emerged, and I think it probably took about 7 years of trying different paths before I kind of landed, and then I met my wife, and that really grounded me, and we had our first child, and it was then that it started to really coalesce, and so the gene keys, which is my approach to, as I just mentioned, through contemplation, is everything that I learned and saw in those 3 days is coming out through the gene keys. And the gene keys is the structure that I use. It's the word or the name or the brand that I use to kind of bring out that wisdom that I learned, and all the fruits of those things that came to me. And I'm still doing it. And so it's an ongoing kind of flowering. So it's now I have a structure. It's something of a relief.
Right. So, could you give us a little insight into your 3 days? I mean, what you were experiencing? You were seeing, sort of the, I don't know. I mean, how would you describe it? I know it's probably to some degree indescribable, right? But if you could give us a little, your best crack at it.
Well, I always go back to this idea of the light, because my experience was that my body was filled with light. Not just it was filled with light, but it was light. And the light was streaming through me, and it was streaming through me uninterrupted. So in other words, I think it gets interrupted, and but uninterrupted, uninhibited, boundless. It meant that my consciousness was everywhere, was in everything, streaming. And I could actually reach out into the kind of landscape around me. I was in my bedroom. I remember having this, when I was just first experiencing it. And I could reach out into the landscape with literally with the fingers of light. And I could touch I could touch the consciousness of things and beings that were far, far away, like miles away. I could sense them and feel them and see them, and I was inside them. And then I began to realize that actually I could travel anywhere, and that actually I could know anything. So I started to ask questions. It's not like I asked questions, because the moment the question was there, it was answered instantly. Right. So anything I wanted to know, I could know, whether it was from the past, whether it was from the future, whether it was about me, whether it was about the cosmos. All the answers just were supplied instantly. And so I did quite a lot of diving in those 3 days.
I bet you did.
And I was taken also. I say I was taken. I mean, I followed a course. I followed a sort of pilgrimage or a journey throughout England, a mystical journey through those 3 days. The first thing I had to say to the woman I was living with, I had to sort of try and explain to her something. So I did my best, and then I kind of excused myself, and I just said, I'm going to just follow this. And I disappeared for 3 days. And I followed this course, literally, that was magical and mysterious. And each experience or person that I met as I traveled had a different message for me. But the message was way more than you could ever imagine. So meeting a stranger, that stranger became a cosmic messenger. And they gave me a cosmic message, and it was in a way that I kind of felt like I was. There was at one point I felt like I was walking in the footsteps of the Christ, and that was a feeling I had, and that I was actually treading in where his feet had been, because memories came up out of the land to me, and so my message is very connected to that consciousness that comes from the Christ. But it also, it has its roots in all beings. So I've traveled in my awareness ever since through all lineages. And I suppose what I should say is that even though that I came down off that trip, I call it a trip, a door sort of closed, but the door didn't fully close. It kind of was left a little bit ajar. And so it enables me to go through that little bit of the door in my contemplation, and I can connect in with the wisdom. I call it the transmission, because it's a living field of wisdom that exists at all times in all beings, and it's out of that my stream of consciousness and my teachings flow, and the gene keys were born out of that, and they continue to flow from that. And it's something I'm very clear that belongs to everyone.
Sure. Yeah. Now, when you say you journeyed for those 3 days, you mean in your consciousness? You weren't actually physically. You stayed in your room.
No, I physically journeyed as well.
Oh, you did.
It was both an external journey and an internal journey. So it was the journey itself became a metaphor for existence. So every experience I had was a part of the myth of existence and our existence. And so it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the very end, I was sitting on a mountain top, and on a small island off the west coast of Wales, a very remote island that I'd had to find a fisherman to take me out to in his boat. And I asked him if he could leave me on the island. And there was really nothing on the island. And so I was sitting on the hilltop of this island, and I was sitting on top of the world pineal gland. That was what it was. It became, this little island became sitting on top of the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the gland in our brain that some of you, probably many of your listeners know, that relates to the sort of crown chakra. So I sat on this mountaintop, like many mystics have received visions on mountaintops, and then I saw the whole vision of the whole of existence there. And then it said, okay, now it's time to go back to the world. And I came down off the mountain, and as I came down off the mountain, the state dissipated. And I came down, and there was the ferryman waiting for me, the perfect timing. He'd come back exactly when I asked him to. And there he was, and I got in his boat, and I went back from the island over to the mainland, and then I went back into my life, and it was like I was given my sort of my mission. So it was a very mythic 3 days in that sense.
Now that's a lot more interesting than my initial mission of being a paper boy.
Well, I had those things as well, like many of us. Yeah.
I guess we all have different missions at different times that unfold. That's a pretty epic story, Richard. So,
thank you. I never fully told it. Yeah, so it's nice to tell it.
Say again.
I said I haven't always fully told it, so it's nice to tell it. It comes out differently every time I say it.
Sure. How wonderful! What a great story. So you basically came back down off the mountain. Now, one of the things that you were shown during these days was the gene keys. Is that correct?
Well, I wasn't shown the gene keys. I saw the pattern of life. And I was the pattern. So I was inside the kind of holographic pattern of all life. And it was later, as I was, kind of assembling the jigsaw pieces, that the gene keys started to come together. So gotcha. I had to take these different systems, like building blocks, like a child with building blocks, and then I had to build the vision that I had seen inside, and I started to build it unconsciously in a way, almost in a sort of, in a way that was intuitive.
Right.
And so I built it fundamentally, and one of the main building blocks became the Chinese I Ching, which is, very perfectly reflects the fundamental patterns of the universe. So, But other things also came in there, like the chakras and all these different systems, and they are all integrated in there in some form.
Gotcha. So were these received in a similar dramatic fashion of like studying the I Ching or astrology, or I know human design was also a factor that led to the unfolding of the gene keys, correct?
Yes, definitely. I just followed my guidance. I followed my intuition. So it was. I didn't study the I Ching in great depth. I studied. I studied it with this teacher, human design teacher, Ra Uruhu, and the human design was instrumental because it was the beginning of someone else had synthesized lots of streams of different information, and so immediately I was drawn to that because what I had seen was the synthesis of all wisdom. And so that became one of my fundamental building blocks. But then I also saw limitations to it, and I wanted to step beyond those limitations. So I went wider, and I keep going wider, much to the dismay of everyone.
People don't like you adding on. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's not even adding. It's just that I'm kind of known for never repeating a course twice, because there's always something new to emerge. So if I do a course or an aspect, a teaching, I'm kind of done with it once I've done it. There are exceptions where I come back and do it at another deeper layer, but there's so much wisdom in the cosmos that I'd like to explore as much of it as possible. So that's what I do.
And do you feel like you have access to this wisdom? You said the door is still kind of open from your experience, all those years ago. Do you feel like it's like as you sort of reach in and you develop things like the gene keys, but then of course other courses and teachings that you're sort of bringing through? Do you feel they're being received or downloaded, if you will, from the crack in that door?
Yes, in a way. I mean, one way I talk about it is, I saw maybe like Mozart hearing one of his symphonies, and he hears the whole symphony, but he hears it all in one kind of instant, and he knows the entire symphony in his head or in his heart, in his being, and then he has to sit down and work out just write it down. So he takes a quill or a pen and he starts to write all the parts until he's like, and he might work for a week, all day, all night, writing out all those parts because he knows them by rote because he can see how they all fit. And that's exactly how it feels with the Gene Keys. The Gene Keys is a synthesis, and I've seen the whole thing. Wow. But my life's work is to just fill in each of the layers of the synthesis. So it actually there is a completion. For me, I can see one day I'll have completed it. If God willing, I'll kind of get to the last piece, and I go, right, that's the full stop. I'm done.
Wow.
So I know it does have a finite kind of matrix, but then when you go into the matrix, it's infinite because each kind of eye, there's like lots of eyes. Each eye you look through, or window or lens you look through, it leads into the holographic universe. So it leads everywhere. So you can look through any eye and you're looking at the same thing. So people think it's, there are teachers out there that, many spiritual teachers, and they teach the void. They teach from the void or the emptiness, like the Buddhist teachers or the Zen teachers. And I am not one of those teachers. I am an everything teacher. So I teach the everything. I teach looking through every lens, and it leads to the same, and it leads to the void state, because they all come from the void state. But you can access the void state through the color, through the lens, through the the layers, and so that's why you can go through any window and you get to the same place.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Well, okay, let's dive in a little bit into the Gene Keys themselves, because some listeners are probably very familiar. I mean, the Gene Keys has been wildly popular, and almost like a new modality of astrology or human design, or expanded version. I don't know how you might describe that, but what are the fundamentals of the Gene Keys?
Well, as I said, it's a synthesis. So. It's in that sense that the fundamental is that there's only one truth, and the truth ultimately, when you get down to it, is love. So when you come to the Gene Key consists of these 64 archetypes. That's I was saying windows, 64 windows, or like 64 facets of a diamond, and that diamond is consciousness. So each one of these windows is a way to look at a mirror of yourself, of your own consciousness. So there are words that describe each one. There are many layers to it, but the essential words are, for example, can I take one of the ones from your own profile? Because in Gene Keys there's also a profile, which you can get a personal. We can talk about that in a moment. But if I just take a pure Gene Key, let's say the 52nd Gene Key, and the 52nd Gene Key, which, if you know the I Ching, is the same as the 52nd hexagram of the I Ching. That Gene Key, it has a shadow. They all have a shadow and a gift and a siddhi. And a shadow is the low frequency state. The gift is what's hidden in the shadow once you've transformed the low frequency state, the shadow. And then the siddhi is a Sanskrit word which means the enlightened consciousness that's hidden within that. So 52nd Gene Key, for example, the low frequency is called stress. Right, so it's a so these are archetypal frequencies. So stress is something that all human beings know, and these Gene Keys are inside all of us. But if you look at a profile, an individual profile, you have a lens on a more specialized area. So it'll show that there are themes that are more prevalent in your life than any of the other themes. So, for example,
like the 52nd is one on my chart that.
So that's one that happens to be in your chart under the kind of the sphere of vocation. It's about vocation. And so stress is a kind of, can be a pattern or a habit that you can fall into. I mean, we can all fall into it, right?
For sure. I definitely can relate to that, and in relation to vocation.
Yeah.
So that certainly resonates with me.
Well, okay. So, I mean, it can be a trap, as for many of us, you can get hooked on stressful jobs or stressful things, and it keeps you in that loop and that loop keeps you from finding the kind of place of deep calm, because the 52nd gene key, it's Siddhi, the highest expression is stillness. So if your true vocation is to be an absolute icon of stillness, of stillness. Now you can be very active and dynamic and be very, very still, and the gift is restraint. So the gift is what comes out of the transformation. So the thing you have to learn is the gift of restraint, and restraint might sound like a kind of difficult, like not such a gift, but actually if your problem is stress, then restraint is the greatest gift you have, because your restraint says no to this person, no to that commitment. No, it's really about saying no to things a lot of the time. But that no is really saying yes to you. It's saying that's not going to be healthy for me. That's not going to be healthy for me. That is going to be healthy for me. So the restraint is knowing how to, thread your way through your life so that you can maintain that kind of core of stillness and then deliver your message. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's an example of how these shadows operate. So the shadow is never our enemy. So if it's stress, it's not the enemy. It's actually the place. It's the ground of our being. So we start with the shadow in the gene keys. So I've answered your question in a long way. The foundational principle of the gene keys is every shadow contains a gift. So every difficult
I say that all the time on the show here. Lump of coal is a diamond in the sky. So it's funny that you even use the diamond as an example, because that's sort of something that I constantly repeat.
Exactly. So you can go through any one of these windows, any one of these gene keys, and they lead there. Each one is a transformational journey, but they allow us to contemplate aspects of our life and then see that mirrored back at us. So we can see the shadow mirrored back, and then as we transmute that shadow, we can see the gift mirrored back, and we can also hold the aspiration of our highest possibility, our enlightened consciousness. And this is where I think the Gene Keys profile is quite unique, because it is actually a map of your fully realized consciousness. And I don't know anywhere else where you can see that map.
Right.
So it's quite
basically
remarkable.
11 spheres that are sort of the primary, I guess, things that you want to look at, from, life's work to vocation to, I'm just reading some of them here: radiance, attraction, purpose. So it's very fascinating.
It's a rabbit hole. You mentioned that, to me before the interview, like that going into your profile is like dropping through a rabbit hole, and you go deeper and deeper and deeper as the layers open up. And it's designed to unlock you in sequences. So I've laid it out in these sequences that you can follow it. So you can follow there are these steps, 33 steps in total. And you can, so the first step you can look at on the website. So if you go to mygenekeys.com and you get your profile, you can go to step 1, and there are all the resources to kind of introduce you to the journey. It is a journey. It's an inner journey. It's going to take you months, if you do it. And you can do after you've looked at the introductory stuff and you've taken the first step, you can, if you decide you want to take the journey, you can take part 1. And part 1 is like 10 steps that takes you through the first 4 gene keys, and which are called your life's work and your evolution, your radiance, and your purpose. And those 4 gene keys that relate to those are they govern the true purpose of your life. So the first part is all about your purpose and you unlocking your purpose, your higher purpose. And that's the subtitle of my book, Embracing Your Higher Purpose.
Right.
So,
and this is on, you said genekeys.com?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
It's all there.
I didn't know if I thought you might have said mygenekeys.com, so I just wanted to clarify for people.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Well, okay, so people can go, guys. You can go there and you can check out, at least start dipping your toe in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly.
to figure out a little bit more insight into who you are and what you are. And now you've talked a little bit about the shadow, the gift, the city. One of the things that I was researching that I found really, really interesting was you refer to it as a hologenetic profile, and you talk about sort of the hologenesis and the sacred wound. And I was reading up on that, and I found that super fascinating. Could you give a little insight into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Hologenesis, and the fact that I call this the hologenetic profile is because it consists of these 11 spheres. Okay, and each one is really a sphere to contemplate, these 11 gene keys. But, so you step through the first one. It's like looking through the first lens. And what that does is it leads you through a pathway. And the spheres are connected by pathways. And they all have names. And the first pathway, for example, is called challenge. So the first thing we have to look at in life is challenge. What's your challenge? And that challenge leads to your evolution, and your evolution is a gene key that tests you. It really tests you. It makes you grow. So for example, yours is the 41st gene key, which is about it's one of the gene keys that has to do with the future. It's always obsessed by what's coming, by the latest thing, by what's and because of that, it can get sidetracked easily in the shadow level into the realm of fantasy, and it can a whole life can be lost just indulging in the fantasies of that life offers us, and miss the actual beauty of what you're actually here to do. So it drives you, and there's a story in each one of these, and it's called hologenetic because the stories are within, the stories just open up as layers within layers, like that experience I had when I had those 3 days, and your life becomes a mythic unfolding. So it's a bit like looking at your profile is a bit like peeling off the layers of the onion, and as you go deeper, you're peeling off layers that cause us suffering, which is why I call it the sacred wound. Because we come to the earth wounded, we carry this wound, we carry this suffering, and no one escapes the suffering. But most of us run from the suffering, or distract ourselves from the suffering constantly, or look for the answers outside in our love life, in wealth, in chasing our tail, in the world, instead of looking within. So when you start to look within at the layers of the suffering, and it's difficult, it's uncomfortable, right? Then slowly you start to transmute those layers and those stories. So moving into your profile layer by layer is an extraordinary journey, because each layer that you peel back and you transform, there's another layer underneath, another rich part of your storyline. And the profile also takes you back. The second part of it, part 2, is called the Venus sequence, because it's to do with we calculate it from positions of planet Venus and Mars. It shows how our relationship patterns are built, and they're built on patterns of wounding that took place in the first 7 years of our life. And so as we go back, we have to rethread our story in a way. That's what awakening is to me. Awakening is you have to follow back, like the kind of salmon seeking its source upstream, following from the ocean, going back up the river to its source where it was born. That is our mythic journey of awakening, is to go further back and unpick and let go of the wounding attachments that hold us back. And as you go deeper and deeper into that story, you open up wider and wider vistas of who you are and of how much love you're capable of. So it is a journey of openings, and then within that is another opening and another opening. So that's why it's holographic or hologenetic, because it's 11 spheres, but it's only one sphere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and when I was reading up on it, you were talking about sort of the void state, as you referenced earlier, and how there was sort of a rip in the void state at some point, which led to the sacred wound, and that all of creation and evolution actually is us attempting to repair that. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, that's a part of that's the beauty of life. See, if there wasn't something wrong, no, it's not really wrong, but if there wasn't a hole, there'd be nothing to try and fill that hole.
Right.
So the very word wound, it's a lovely word in a way, wound, because it's about wound. You know, I see it, the wound is wound around our DNA. It's wound into everything. It's the fabric of existence. It's what the ancients called the Maya, the illusion of time and space. And we're wound up in it. And so we have to unwind that wound. And when we unwind it, we start to kind of realize that it's just it's not real. That's what I saw in my 3 days. It's not real. You know, our suffering is actually not real. So by us going into the matrix deeper, we start to peel off those layers. And we start to see that all evolution is actually that salmon or that thing seeking its source. You know, it's seeking to get back to itself. And what I saw again in the vision I had is that the beginning of time, the beginning of our cosmos, will go through this evolutionary period, and then it will come to the end. And the end and the beginning are the same place.
Right.
Right. I mean, that sounds very philosophical.
A journey to nowhere.
Well, it is, but then it starts again at another iteration. Right. It's a constant birthing of itself, the cosmos. Consciousness. It's very hard for us to grasp because it's eternal.
Right.
And our mind cannot grasp what the word eternity means. It just cannot do it. In fact, if you allow that word to enter into your mind deeply enough, it will just short circuit your mind. And then you'll go into, if you're lucky, you'll actually have an experience of unity. So good word to contemplate.
Yeah. So that's a path to sort of having a divine experience, if you will.
Yeah.
Contemplating
and that's what
the idea of eternity.
That's what these cities are in our profiles. So when you look and you see, if you just took away all the words except the cities, and in your profile, for example, you're looking at words like superabundance, stillness, grace, transparency, tenderness, selflessness, humility, immortality. This is your self fully realized divine legacy. That's who you are. You are all those words in one. Those are the expressions of your higher consciousness. And they're just words, but each of those words is has a whole story behind it. So your enlightened state has a certain has a story behind. There's a story to it. No two enlightened beings look the same or behave in the same way.
Right.
So one of the things I did early on is I studied, I read up about enlightened beings, and I collected all these wonderful stories around them. And I saw that, and I began to realize, well, all these cities, these higher states, these divine gifts, they manifest in all kinds of miraculous different ways. And so, we have those miracles actually embedded in our DNA, but we have to awaken them. And that's the next phase of our evolution.
One of the things that I saw, doing some research was reference to the golden path. Is that what that is? Is like when someone, the quickest or easiest way, perhaps, to unlocking one's cities?
Yeah, well, that's the journey into your profile. So you have your profile. So I sort of look at it as in order to go deep into the gene keys, a good place to begin is to get your profile, which I call your compass, right? And then to buy the book. So there's a Gene Keys book, right? I haven't talked about the book yet, but the book,
right?
Is a big book. It's inside that book are every single gene key described in detail, all those 3 levels of consciousness. So it's like 600 pages, and it's a big book. And that's the map. So you have a map and a compass, and then you have a guide, and the guide is the golden path. And the golden path, it uses the book and the profile, and it takes you step by step. So step 1, very clear, very practical, just says, read this, contemplate this, think about this question, do this, watch this video. That's step 1. And then it says, all right, when you're ready, move to step 2. And then step 2 says, okay, we're on to the next one now. We're going to look at your life's work and look at the gene key of your life's work. So for you, it'd be looking at gene key 31. Read gene key 31, explore it. Each gene key also has a line number. This is some of the detail that I don't need to go into really, but so there are one of 6 variations of every gene key. So in the profile, in the Golden Path, which is an online program, but it's also this written in a book form, it explains exactly how to read what that gene key means and what that line variation is. So one of your line variations is called the server. And it's about your line 4. That's your life's work. Your life's work is to serve. It's a wonderful life's work. To serve.
Yes, it is. It's the most joyous thing I've found to do. So I'm glad that's what popped up.
Exactly. Mine is the same, by the way. Line 4.
Oh, really?
So there's only 6 lines. So there's millions of people have them, but all the line 4s in the world, they have a certain flavor. And the line 4, for example. The line 4 is when they speak from their heart, there's a resonance that opens up other people's hearts because they're a server. Like line 3, for example, it makes people laugh. Line 4 opens their hearts in a kind of longing way, in a beautiful way. Line 3 makes them laugh. Line 2 uses its passion. Line 1 uses its intensity. All in these, so as you begin to explore your gene keys, you begin to kind of see the pattern of your higher life and how you can follow it. So it's very life affirming in that way, but it also doesn't deny the shadow. It says you have to look here as well. You have to see the thing that can get in the way for you. So
arrogance in my case.
Yeah, and arrogance can be very, very subtle. Because it may not be like something you see straight away. It's very hard to see your own arrogance. And it creeps out in subtle ways often. So it's a good one to look at and go, well, because that gene key 31 is about leadership, and so as soon as it kind of feels that energy of like, I'm being seen as a leader, that's sometimes when the little tone of arrogance can just drop in, in that moment. So it can bring us down. So lots of ways of looking at that.
Very, very fascinating. Yeah,
leaders,
I've only just.
Sorry, I was going to say again. I was going to say all leaders, because that's a leadership gene key. All leaders have in some respect the shadow of arrogance, because it's always the potential. The more power you are given, the more is the potential to kind of come over to the dark side.
Let it get to your head.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very natural. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. That's the temptation, right?
Yeah. But then the city is humility. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that real quick. Since we've kind of dissected my life's work is.
Yes, I apologize.
Humility is this. Yeah, no problem. So it seems almost like an interesting one to go with. Leadership, arrogance being the shadow, humility being the city, the highest expression. Yeah. Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Well, sure. I mean, in there is a whole life journey. So it's your whole life journey, your outer life, right? Your life in the world. And and so humility, what it says is that life itself will keep humbling you. So whenever the moment you're given, you forget to be of service. Even for a split second, life will instantly humble you. It will arrange something to make you kind of go, oh, look what I did, because someone will come and remind you. Someone will be a mirror, or something will happen in your life that will instantly humble you. And that's the compassionate universe communicating to you, constantly reminding you, humility, humility, humility. You're not doing any of this. You're not doing any of this. There is no you.
Right.
It's just telling you over and over and over again. The moment you're sort of in a leadership position, it's not taking away your power at all, because you can enjoy and you can be powerful and big and strong and speak out your, the 31st Gene Key is all about speaking out your truth, which you do, right? But then it's also like, don't get carried away. And the moment you get carried away, that humility comes in. Life gives you a little cuff around the head, or the Zen
across the beak.
The Zen teacher that kind of hits you with a stick and goes, "Bad boy," and you have to laugh. Yeah, you have to laugh. You have to go, "Oh God, yes, I've called myself out." So that's an example. You have to find the humor in these things as well.
Yeah. My brother was in a band not a few years back, and one of the favorite lyrics that always sticks out for me is from his writing was, one of his songs was, humility is the key word when faced with these lessons. And that's probably one of the lyrics that I've even said it on the show before. It just stuck with me. And so it's interesting to see, my life's work, that is like sort of the ultimate expression of what I can achieve, so that explains why that resonates so strongly.
Yeah, it's a really lovely one to have.
Yeah, definitely a key word for me. So, all right, well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So, needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. So question that I have. So I had Dr. Bruce Lipton on a while back, episode 161 for any of you guys who are interested. And Dr. Bruce Lipton is amazing. He's done work on genes. The Biology of Belief was his book, one of his books, and basically talks about how we can turn genes on and off based off of our beliefs. And he actually shows how this works, in the body and how beliefs correlate to this. And I really love how he ties sort of the science together with a lot of this, what other people may consider woo-woo. I create my reality with my beliefs. He ties it together in a brilliant way in showing that genes actually are not these rock solid things we've believed they've, been told that they are since we were a little kid, hey, it's in your genes. It's in your genes. Well, actually you turn genes on and off with beliefs. And so it's malleable. And I'm curious how, because that's something that we haven't really talked about too much, is, how this actually ties into the physical phenomenon of the gene and then this idea of turning them on and off, as Dr. Lipton taught, is that something that also, correlates with the gene keys? Can I, or would be turning them on and off be equated to my city versus my, shadow? If you understand the question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do. Absolutely. And absolutely. They're completely connected. And when I came across Bruce's work a decade ago, I was, you can imagine, I was very excited, and I was just conceiving the gene keys at that time as he was having his breakthroughs. So we were having breakthroughs at the same time. And although I never actually met him, but it corresponds exactly, because he smashed this whole notion of the primacy of DNA, that DNA runs us. And that was my experience in my 3 days, that the light that was coming through me was actually coming from my DNA. It was coming from this microscope, it was kind of being released from within my physical being. And and so what I realized there is that the light, the siddhi, the highest states of consciousness are actually compressed down into our DNA. And so they're waiting for the right code. We have to input the right code, and then they respond. The biology responds. So if you input the code that corresponds to the shadow, then the biology responds to that. And you don't feel great, because it then triggers all the hormones in the endocrine system to kind of shut down pathways, and you end up feeling constricted, and you end up breathing less. And so when you begin, this is the power of contemplation, right? Because as you contemplate the higher keynotes, you begin to sort of inhabit them, and you begin to imprint yourself with them, you literally are putting that frequency into your DNA, and your DNA then releases it opens up those pathways through your biology that trigger the endocrine system to then process those higher chemicals, for instance, the chemicals that open our consciousness up in our brain, and those glands that I talked about, the pineal, the pituitary, that open up these pathways that allow us access to feelings of euphoria, for example, entering states of silence, of inner silence, where thoughts stop, or higher visionary states where information about the cosmos can be downloaded, like the experiences I've had. All those kind of wisdom streams are available to us because they're in the body. The body is the physical body is the fundamental building block of consciousness. And the more, it's really going to be interesting over the next centuries, because as science, particularly physics, comes together with genetics, and they begin to see, the correlation between consciousness and the physical body. They're going to there's some of the fundamental paradigms that are kind of believed at the moment are going to collapse as well. Like, the mind is utterly embedded in the body. It's not in the brain. The mind is actually everything. So our mind, our mind can reach out and touch anything or anyone. Our higher mind, it's limitless. The mind, the universe is made up of the mind. It's just one big mind. So through you accessing, for example, the depth of that humility, like the Christ consciousness, for example, the level of that humility shown by that one being, Christ, let's say, or it can be any great teacher. The emptiness of that humility is what allows that stream of kind of selflessness to move through. And then and then with it comes, the body releases the codes that allow you to experience that state. So it's reflected. So I hope I'm being clear. Like, we input the frequency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we input the frequency into our DNA. It's why they're called the gene keys.
Wow. Very, very insightful and powerful to realize. It's sort of just a deeper understanding of the, the inner workings of existence, really, and human existence. and how the physical and, and spiritual are tied together.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, the Gene Keys, because it's not the easiest sell. People will sort of say, can you write a shorter book? Can you make it simpler? And right. It's not a fast food system. It's not necessarily for everyone right away, because you have to come in and you have to really digest it, and you have to show some commitment and really want to peel back the onion. And because you don't get anything instantly that's of real value. You'll know that. So contemplation requires that you take a long-term view, and then you can take a few small bites at the beginning and have a taste and see if you like it. But then at some point you're going to have to actually make the decision, I'm going to explore this. So one of the things that I realized early on in my experience was, in order to really input these higher codes in someone's life so that they would have a lasting effect, you have to. It takes some time. It's not like you can just do it in 5 minutes. It takes years. So I kind of think that's why the sort of higher consciousness that created the Gene Keys actually is creating it as such a web, because it keeps you in for years, and you need years because you need to keep doing it in order to keep re-imprinting those higher layers. Because if you just do it for 3 months, you might have a quick experience, but then if you let go and then go back to something else, it doesn't go deeper. Right. So it requires that kind of sort of lengthy study, so that the layers keep opening and opening and opening, and they're opening in our DNA. So in a way, it's kind of a trick. It's a trick to keep us contemplating longer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's
good trick.
Same for me, it keeps me contemplating longer. Yeah.
Right. Now, you do regular workshops as well, Richard. And one of, as I mentioned at the top of the show, someone was playing. It was, like I said, it was a music mix with some of your teaching, just different clips of you talking interspersed. And there's so much powerful wisdom there that you were sharing in those clips. And I sort of wish I would have gotten a hold of them before this so I could take some notes, because I was out at an event, at the time. But I do remember a couple of things that you were talking about. One was, the journey into the human heart, and how important opening the heart is, and how that, correlates with fear and fear stopping people. Maybe you could speak a little bit on that, because it was such powerful wisdom that you were sharing.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, I can tell you where you can find those things. I think if you go to genekeys.com, I'm just checking. I think they're under resources. So there's a lot of free stuff on my website.
Okay.
And if you look into resources and you scan down, there are all collaborative projects in music and art down there. And I think you'll probably find the ones, because I do a lot of audio recordings. And one of the things I've done, apart from the book, is I decided to also do audios for every Gene Key. Because I wanted to get not just the written transmission, but the oral transmission. And the oral transmission comes out through my stories, my kind of poetic turn of phrase. It's much more subjective, so I talk about each Gene Key and I apply it more to like things that come to me spontaneously. And it has a different feel from the book, which is a very sort of steady stream transmission. So anyway, and then, yes, people like those teachings, and so I haven't answered. I'll answer a question.
Well, it's something with people's voice too. Sorry to cut you off, but what I was going to say, I just wanted to interject there. It's something with people's voice too. I've noticed, having the privilege to talk to so many luminaries on the show, and you have that same quality to your voice that so many people who have done the work and have brought through, done the work on themselves and brought through great messages for the world. There's sort of just this, calm about, energetic calm that washes over you when someone speaks. And that's something that really, because, this was prior to us on this call, and it was the first time I'd really heard your voice. And I was just like, wow, it not only was the content of what you're saying so powerful, but the delivery. There's, and it's just sort of permeates everything. And it's something that I've noticed many times with people on the show that I'm just, not only do I love their message, I love the way they sound delivering their message.
Well, one of the things that I've done that you'd probably enjoy, and I hope your listeners might also enjoy, is, and it's also, I'm mentioning it because it's also answering your question about love, is I've done a series called The Ecstatics. I'm still doing it. And you can find it on my website if you go to About, and then you go to Richard Rudd, and you scan down, and the series is there. It's a free series. It's a free audio series. And in that series, what I do is I've picked people who, ecstatic people from history. Like, for instance, Walt Whitman, your great American poet. He's a good example. And then I do a contemplation over probably 3 to 4 months of that person and their work. And their fractal of love. So how love comes through them, maybe it comes through their words or their silence, right, or their, so it's about ecstasy and how they express that ecstasy. So I've chosen people from all different cultures and times. And then I do this kind of 1 hour monologue that's very spontaneous and very flowing and poetic. And then it's usually set to music and appropriate music. So it's very hypnotic. And lots of people love that series because I know many people that listen to it but going to sleep. And I love doing it. And I continue to do them as well. Yeah. And it's a sort of offering from my heart, a free offering to anyone. And I really love people to share that stuff as well, share it out with others. Because it ultimately, beautiful. What we're unlocking here in our DNA is we are unlocking that love, and we often don't think of ourselves when we think of like ecstasy. Ecstasy is a flooding from within our being of when we connect into the higher consciousness, and it can manifest in many different ways through us. Perhaps it comes out through, if you're a musician, it comes out through your music. If you're an artist, through your art. It comes out in many, if you're a kind of, it might come out through your service, but it comes out in this very ecstatic, inspiring way. And so, in a way, what I'm imploring people through the courses I do and things like that is that see yourself as one of these beings, as one of these time-traveling ecstatics, who is not afraid to speak the splendor in your heart. That you don't need to be afraid to let your tone kind of sing out with the kind of wonder that's in your heart, and share that, and share those high values, and live it and embody it. And it includes the shadow. It doesn't require that we be perfect. Not at all. It requires that we're fully human, and we're fully aware and responsible for our difficulties and our sufferings and our mistakes. But we're very, very compassionate towards ourselves and others about those mistakes, and that's what kind of releases the love stream through our heart. And working with the Gene Keys over time, I recommend it because it starts to unlock that ecstasy inside you, and it's a very safe and very natural way to play with it. So it's why Gene Keys is spreading all around the world and being translated into so many different languages, because people are triggering that ecstasy. And it's not like the Gene Keys is just an excuse. It's just an excuse to do it. Yeah.
A permission slip. And
then you get to meet other people from other countries. So there's a whole Gene Keys Society set up with its own website, which is a self-organizing society of people interested in using the Gene Keys in all kinds of different ways, from geneticists to doctors to healers to, to sort of wild people to nature people to all kinds of people from all countries connecting with each other and sharing their gifts and their genius. Yeah, so everyone's welcome to Gene Keys. It's it's a very generous and kind of open, playful system.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful. So what would you say, Richard, is the, of course, this comes back to my chart of always interested in the future, is the biggest thing that, is unfolding? What you've obviously received this incredible view, behind the veil, if you will. And I'm curious what your feelings are of on the state of the world and, sort of what you foresee coming next and maybe both, from a trial and tribulation standpoint and also these are the things that I am so excited about.
Absolutely. Well, I one of the things I wanted, one of the questions I needed to know from my state is why me, why now? Yeah. And so the Gene Keys kind of, the why me is personal. Okay. The why now is like for all of us, right? Why now? Because, if you look at Gene Keys and you sort of go online and you look at the books and things, one of the symbols you'll see dotted around is a dragonfly. And when I was writing the book, I wrote the book not in order. I didn't write like Gene Key 1 and 2 and 3. I just let them come when they came, and they kind of came in a flow, in a random order, and I wrote them. And at a certain point, I got to this Gene Key number 55. And I got a bit of a shock because it opened up this huge. And when I was writing it, I was really living it. So I would really sort of access the city. I had to kind of open the door a little bit and experience a bit of the city in order to be able to write about it. I had to kind of remember a little bit, and so that I could write it. And when I opened the 55, which was freedom, it kind of just blew me away. And I started writing, and it was the chapter came out, and it was like 5 times longer than any of the others. And with it came the story of evolution, and it was like this whole unfolding. And again, it's somewhere on my website. I think you can, if you look under book, it's in there. It's just, you can read it. You can download that chapter for free. Gotcha. And it's a real read, and it's very prophetic. So it tells why we're here. And the symbol of the dragonfly, it's a lovely symbol, because in the symbol of the dragonfly is contained the answer to your question of why now. Because the dragonfly, fascinating creature, rather like the caterpillar, it has 2 very different lives. The dragonfly starts its life underwater, where it's called a nymph, and it lives for 2 to 3 years underwater. As a predator. It's a very successful predator underwater. It doesn't have wings or anything. It never leaves its water environment. It's an underwater predator. And then at a certain point in its life, some sleeping gene just triggers something inside it, and it suddenly does something it's never done before. It finds a reed or a stalk of grass, and it climbs up, usually in the late spring, or early summer. It climbs up out of the water towards the sunlight, and for the first time ever, it comes out of the water. It puts its head out of the water, and it climbs up this stalk of grass, and it hangs on this stalk of grass in the air, which it's never been in. And something incredible takes place. The sunlight starts to work on it, and this kind of, it's clinging to this stalk, and this incredible transmutation takes place inside it as the dragonfly starts to emerge, and it cracks the casing of its old life. And then this thorax that you kind of see in dragonflies, it starts to uncurl, and then the wings kind of uncurl, and suddenly there's this creature sitting there, and it's split out of its old shell. But what's amazing about it is that it's the water element, that actually pumps the wings open. It's like a hydraulic system. So the water element actually pushes and pumps the whole thing to open up and unfurl and uncurl. And then it's sort of hanging there with these wings, and it had no idea. It has no idea what's going on,
Right.
And one could imagine, and then suddenly a puff of wind, and the wing, and it pushes it, and suddenly it's a flying dragon. It's an insect of the air, a magnificent creature, multicolored, translucent, absolutely aerobatic, and it never returns to its old life. It can't.
Right.
The one-way street, and that's us. That is us, and the water element, and is the shadow. It's our suffering. It's our emotions. And so what's occurring in us as a species is a genetic mutation, that's coming to humanity, an actual genetic physical mutation. This is what this is. This is what came in the book. This is what came through the 55th gene key. This is the drumbeat underlying the gene keys, that we are part of a genetic change that's coming, and that it will change us from within. And we have no idea. When those cities come online, we have no idea how different a being we will be, because we're still underwater. Or most of the people listening to this are in the process of climbing up the stalk.
Right.
Some of us are in the air, and the casing is beginning to crack, and we're freaking out.
Right.
And you have to let go and surrender and allow and it's going to take generations, because a genetic mutation, they've happened in the past. I've looked into this and how DNA operates in a collective level, and species mutate, and they mutate very quickly according to certain, rules. Suddenly, a species like our species mutated before we were human, before we were kind of in this current form. We were a single-celled creature, and that single-celled creature one day suddenly mutated to become multicellular, and then suddenly it developed a spine, and these are sudden leaps in mutations in DNA. And humanity is due one of these leaps in mutations, and it will spread throughout the gene pool, because it will be a much more successful creature. It'll be much more effective, much more efficient. It will live more efficiently. We will not need as much food. We will not need we won't be as dysfunctional as we are. So successful mutations get passed on through the gene pool, and it will be a success. And so for probably centuries, there'll be an old species and a new species living alongside each other. And one won't be able to understand the other. The old one won't understand the new one. The new one will understand the old one, because it's come from that. So children will start coming into the world carrying this mutation, and they will be born with it. And we can already see the very beginning tremors of this in our younger generations. They're different. These so-called indigo children and all that. We can begin to see it coming, but it hasn't yet, fully manifested. So the Gene Keys brings this kind of message. This is what's happening. This is why the awakening is occurring, because it's coming in the physical form as well. We actually have to have a new kind of body in order to house those higher frequencies. And we're going to, we won't recognize ourselves. We just won't. Wow. Like when I was in my higher state, I knew that anything was possible. Anything. Absolutely anything. I knew that in this body, I could do anything.
Wow.
And one of my cities happens to be boundlessness.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So would you, that's such a powerful description of, an exciting description of what's to come for humanity. Wow.
Shall I try and put that into the context of the global headlines?
Yeah. Please.
What we see is that kind of division of the old and the new. We begin to see more and more clearly the old way. And so I personally don't get too hooked up in the storyline, of whether it's the global events. I mean, I empathize with the suffering of humanity wherever I see it, but the storyline itself it's very clear. It's showing us, here's an old mutation, here's a new one. And it's reminding us constantly that way doesn't work. We can see that that style of leadership, for example, is not a good one. It just doesn't work. It's causing chaos. Or we can look at one over here and we can say, well, that one seems to work better. It's still not perfect, but so when we're looking at the state of the world, we needn't worry. Because I one of my ecstatics I did is this wonderful woman called Mother Julian. She was a medieval mystic, and she's famous for this one saying, which is what she entered into the Christ consciousness, and the saying came out of her, and it was, "Children, don't worry. All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well," because she saw where everything was heading. And she wanted to just put everyone at ease. And I'm the same. The Jinkies are the same. I've seen where it's heading. And I just want to say the same. It's all going to be fine. It all is fine. But while we're here, while we're playing out the mystery play, we need to kind of enjoy it as much as we can, appreciate it, and play our role to the hilt, as much as we can. So, yeah, the headlines are playing out this division of the old way and the possibilities of new ways. So, yeah, incredible time to be alive.
Wow. Indeed it is. And it makes me feel good about, if you walk into my bedroom, the first thing you see in front of your face is it's written "all is well." So I think I picked up on her message, and I concur.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
So one of the questions that I like to go to is, sort of a staple, a story of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story. And, you've kind of given us one with your whole 3-day journey. So you get off the hook if you want to stick with that one. You get a pass. But if there's any other story that comes up that you would care to share, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I could tell you a story that isn't about me, because I've been talking about me.
Okay.
I did a course recently, really lovely course called Dare to be Divine. And in it, there are 16 dares. It's an online course. It's on my website. And it gives you these dares. Dare to be courageous, dare to, follow your destiny, these kind of things. And there are 16 of them. And you can take them one at a time, or you can choose the one that resonates the most with you and then really kind of inhabit that dare and take it out into the world and then, see if you can live up to it. Anyway, in that course, it's all about the siddhis, these 64 highest frequency words. And what I do in that is I explore in depth. It's the only time I've ever really done that. I've explored every single one of those words and what it really might mean for us. So the word boundlessness, the 35th gene key, for example, the siddhi, for example, is the siddhi of flight and levitation, because it's about dropping the physical bounds, the cellular bounds that keep us bound to Earth. So there are many stories of people flying or levitating and things like that, and we haven't seen any of them around recently, most of us, but they exist in many cultures. Anyway, so that's an example. As I explored these 64 higher states, I started to kind of unpick all the stories, many of the stories of the saints and the sages, and some wonderful stories came out of it. And sometimes the ones that I like most are the very simple ones. Like there's this wonderful teacher who I love, and his name is Bain Saduno, and he's a man he's not alive anymore. He died in 1944. And he was a Bulgarian mystic and a great master, one of the great Western masters. And there haven't been so many in the last few centuries. And I really recommend his teachings. Bain Saduno, also known as Peter Dunov. And he's from Bulgaria. And so many stories around him, and some really big stories like of his omniscience, of his cities. But the one that just came up to my mind for some reason is in the middle of a talk he was giving one day. He gave thousands of talks, and he was giving a talk to his disciples, and he just went silent for about 2 minutes, in the middle of a stream of talking, and went completely silent. And then he opened his eyes and carried on with the talk as if nothing had happened. And afterwards, one of his disciples, talking to him, said, "Master, what was just wondering why you paused in the middle and you were silent. We were kind of in the middle of a point that you were making. Wondered why you did that." And the teacher just said, he said, I located a lost sheep that had swum out to sea and it was going to drown. And I brought it back, and I turned it round, and I brought it back to an island where it landed safely. I know. And I heard that story, and I thought, that is such an exquisite, beautiful, simple story of the power. It just it opens your eyes into another world, into another dimension, the dimension of the cities. And where a master dwells. And I love those very simple ones like that. So a nice one to share with your listeners.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Really sweet.
So, I mean, I'm wondering. I would love to pick his brain about like the details of how that worked exactly. Was it like did he manifest himself physically as like a dolphin that he jumped on the back of, or like was it an energetic push to make a wave and take him into the shore, or what?
Who knows? I think he probably just turned it round. You
teleported it.
Well, just this way.
Yeah, right. Right. Oh, told it where to swim.
Perhaps because he could feel it. I'm imagining, he could feel it panicking, and and then he just his consciousness, and maybe it called out. Maybe some part of it called out for help.
Yeah.
And he was, part of his consciousness heard that call, and maybe he did that all the time, every day, all the time, constantly.
Right.
And many teachers, you can't see what's actually, going on in their life, but you get these little insights every now and again. So, we have, that's what I mean when I said earlier, we have no concept of the great life, that we will one day live. Yeah.
Well, that is exciting indeed, and certainly a simple but powerful story. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Man, time goes really fast when you're having fun here. I so appreciated this. A couple questions I do have before we kind of sign off. One of the things is, what's next for you? What are you working on?
Well, I've just written my book on contemplation. It's a short book, and people said, "Can you make things shorter?" So I wrote a little Zen book, and it's only 90 pages, and I'm really pleased with it. Every sentence is a diamond, and and so I'm bringing that out soon. And I'm about to launch a new website with a whole new set of products, and I'm about to do a great big new, almost like a kind of campaign. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I'm going to go onto Facebook, and I'm going to have a Facebook page, and I'm going to really use it over the next 6 months and a year. And every week and every day and every month, I'm going to put something out. I've been doing lots of kind of recordings of my daily contemplations, and So I'm going to be sending out, we're going to have a theme for each month. This is going to start, I don't know exactly when the site's going to launch, probably in a month from now, let's say, today. Mm-hmm. That's when we'll launch. Wow. And then with that will come, all these new materials, all this new stuff. And I really would like it, it's sort of the time for Gene Keys now to sort of be more widely known. And so I'm really excited about sharing all that stuff and many new shoots of the synthesis, and so I'll be dropping lots of new seeds around, and I'm also kind of running an ambassador program at the moment. So for people who've done the whole Golden Path program, which is the you'll see on my website, you can then become an ambassador, and you can go through the program that it's not a training. I don't really do trainings, and I don't have teachers as such. I don't have that whole sort of hierarchy.
Right.
The Gene Keys it just requires that you embody it. So the ambassador program, which we're doing the first one now, it's a 9-month program that helps people embody the wisdom stream of Gene Keys and helps them to kind of, how I said, I can open the door a little bit and then I get the stream of the wisdom. And in that program, I'm showing people how to do that. I'm showing them how they can open that door and they can have access to their stream, and it will come out in their way, and they can, through their genius. And so I'm kind of building that whole momentum at the moment with the new site and these new ambassadors, and reaching out into the world with it, and new books and new programs. And so there's a lot coming. I'm sort of riding a wave. So if anyone's interested in Gene Keys and my work, and just come and make sure, if you get a profile, you'll be on our mailing list anyway. So you'll receive all that stuff if you're interested in it, and you can participate. You really, if you come to Gene Keys Society, you'll be welcomed there warmly, and you can kind of find other people in your area studying Gene Keys, which is a lovely thing to do. Because helping each other study a deep wisdom is a wonderful way to make friendships, make a lasting friendship. So, and meet people from other countries, which is really exciting. So I'm spreading it, and I'm about to sort of go into a phase of traveling. I think next year I'm going to Russia, and possibly China, and returning the Gene Keys back to its source in Asia, which I'd love to do, where it comes from, the I Ching comes from. It's being translated into Chinese now, and it exists in many other languages. So I'm following its momentum, and wherever there are groups of people enthused and impassioned by it, I kind of go there. So there's a lot coming. And we're having this is way down the road, but in 2020, we're having a big international Gene Keys festival, and we're having it in Bulgaria, in Eastern Europe, which is a beautiful country. And so that's going to be a wonderful event. It'll be our first international event.
Very, very exciting. And just to reiterate to you guys out there, genekeys.com, GENEKEYS.com is the way to connect and link into all this goodness. Wow, this has been such an epic conversation, Richard. I so appreciate you taking the time to come on and share and help me for sure have a deeper understanding of this work. And I look forward to diving in deeper myself and continuing to learn and follow your work as well. I do have one last question I would like to leave you with. And it's my standard signing off question. In 60 seconds or less, Rich, what is the meaning of life according to Richard Rudd? Are you helping a sheep?
I am. I think I've said it all. And so I have no more words. I will allow that just to that question to be answered by the silence, if you don't mind.
But I love it. That's a great answer. Thank you, Richard, for all that you do. You are truly an inspiration, my friend. And I look forward to connecting with you again, hopefully in 3D at some point. And until next time, journey well.
Thank you, Brandon. It's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for your humility.
Thank you. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.